Thank you.
Okay, no more cursing.
Thank you, Maria. I'm calling to order the Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, February 16th, 2023. This meeting will be audio and video recorded. Please take care not to share anything you don't want recorded. May I have an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
thank you. Roll calls.
Yeah, jury's.
Yeah, and Stephen,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Jill.
Aye, sorry.
That's right. Jeremy on, no. Okay, all righty. I am now going to open up for public comments. For anything that's not on our agenda. And I'm closing on public comment. Okay. So today we have review, discussion, and potential adoption of motion for the following town meeting warrant articles. Number 73, Campbell Sutton bylaw amendment noise. We have had previously an extensive discussion on this, and I'm looking to my committee members to see if they have further questions of Campbell.
Well, did Campbell have a response to the police chief's opinion that it makes no difference?
So, Campbell?
Yes,
Yes, hi.
Okay.
Good afternoon,
Hi.
Campbell. Thank you for being here.
well, thank you for,
Yeah, the police chief has suggested that, or the assistant police, deputy police chief has suggested that, the enforcement of this is very difficult because you can't isolate just pool equipment noise at a distance of 30 or 40 or any number of feet, because there's other noises that you are also measuring at the same time. So when that was the one thing that was open in our discussion last time, one of the committee members had asked whether it was possible to, how would this get enforced and how would it be measured? So I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about this.
I
And
do,
think I think he also
excuse-
said that the general noise level is normally around 55 decibels.
There was something about a windy day.
Yeah, maybe on a windy day, that's what it could have been,
Yeah,
yeah.
he said on a windy day, it's louder
Yeah.
than that. So, go ahead, Campbell.
okay, thank you. Well, I'm so glad that he got back to you since he didn't get back to me in my request for comment from him. So I wasn't aware that he had spoken to you because he wasn't at the last meeting I was at when we were discussing the noise. And there is so he obviously said that he has the equipment to measure the sound. Now, it doesn't have to be a pool. It could be air conditioning or air handling equipment or fans is my understanding under the noise article and at 40 feet. And what I was able to discern is that the 55 decibel, well, a couple of things. So one, determination of these regulations on noise is at a local level, and that the 55 decibels is pretty much globally recognized as a reasonable level for outdoor noise levels, and it's 45 for indoors. Now, I guess one could globally say, well, you know, you can't really measure the sound. I'm having difficulty with that because this is not like just, this is at a specific distance, correct? And in a specific direction. So it's not, I'm not thinking of it measuring sound as just randomly putting a microphone out. So I guess I guess I can understand where one wouldn't want to have to enforce anything anyway. I mean, I get that because it all asks someone to have to, one, measure something and two, enforce something. But I would remind people that this is I'm not asking for a difference in decibel. Okay, so we're still at the globally accepted 55 decibel range. I'm merely adjusting the distance at which you can hear that. And from Peter, I believe his name's Peter Hale, in researching some of the things that he's presented, given that sound does attenuate and the decibel reading of the source of the sound can be made at the source of the sound, and then the ability to determine the sound at a attenuation at a distance is possible. And they even have, apps or computer programs that can do that for you. For instance, I'm not sure if anyone listened to the pool pump situation with a variable speed pool pump, where at 1,000 repetitions per minute, so I think that's somewhere around 30 gallons per minute, the decibel reading is at 57. So in the video, what they're measuring is sound of the variable pump and relating it to the water flow, how many gallons per minute. And this sort of depends on the size of your pool. But if you are trying to either heat your pool or use a salt chlorinator to chlorinate your pool, then you need to have a certain pressure going through both the heater and the chlorinator to be effective. And so generally you're going to run your variable speed pump at over 1900 RPMs. And as they said in the video, this would run up, well, they have 2000 RPMs running at approximately 76 decibels. And that's measured at the source of the pump. And through the attenuation program, you could determine how loud that would be at 30 feet.
Campbell,
And-
Campbell, I'm going to stop you for a second here.
Okay.
Because, and my reasoning for it is to highlight that one of the issues that came up with the fertilizer article last year that Roberta Santa Maria was quite clear about is that the Board of Health cannot go on private property to enforce anything without permission of the owners. So whilst you could potentially go up to a pool pump and take a sound reading, you couldn't do that without the police department cannot do that without permission of the owners. So that adds a layer of complexity. So whilst there is a equation that could get you an answer, the reality is that the ability to take that measurement on someone's private property is probably relatively low.
Okay. So I guess I'm confused. So because when I asked at the police department, they said that they do have equipment to measure and that they have used that equipment to do so at the 40-foot distance. So I guess I'm having difficulty with the idea that they could do it in complaint circumstances where it's necessary at 40 feet, but they're not able to do it at 30 feet. But I don't think that that's going to get me anywhere questioning that. So I guess I'm not quite.
Well,
I mean, if we're in the enforcement section of this whole system, it seems to me that, I mean, the amendment I guess I would make at the end for enforcement would be the first step upon a complaint would be a verbal request to quiet the equipment. And if there was a repeat offense, then you could give a citation, and then within 6 months that situation would need to be remediated, I guess was what I was thinking.
So Campbell, again, that would be something that you'd have to ask the moderator because it's not currently in your article and it could potentially be outside the scope of the changes that are allowed. My understanding is articles can be made smaller or lesser, but they can't be made bigger. again, Sarah.
Okay, I'm sorry, yes,
Sarah
I,
is the
I
agent.
apologize.
No,
I
no need
didn't-
to apologize. I'm just pointing out that the enforcement piece you're discussing now is not in your article.
Okay,
Okay,
So,
so is there,
I guess
Uh,
there's nothing to be said. I did a bunch of research for future use, I suppose, because it's really sort of whatever this is what it appears to me anyway, is that it's really based on what the deputy chief said about their ability to enforce even the current system. So then does that? you
I
know,
think
so
my
I'm
understanding.
confused. I'm confused because it.
My
it
understanding
seems
is,
that-
yes, they can measure it, but they can't isolate the measurements. So because this is specific to pool pumps, air handlers, and exhaust fans, they can stand on a property line and say, yes, the noise coming over may be, say, 60 decibels. However, they can't say, and it is because of those three things. Because a car
Okay,
can
so-
drive by and people can drive by. So they're saying they can measure it, but they can't isolate it.
Okay, so again, the
That's it.
only part of chapter 101-2 that I am amending is the distance, is 30 feet. It is already written as those pool pumps are already included. I'm not adding anything.
Yep.
The only piece I'm changing is the distance. And it would seem to me that if they can at least tell at the 40 feet whether it's 60 decibels, but they can't identify it, it would seem they could do the same thing at 30 feet, correct? They just couldn't identify which thing was, specifically what was making the noise to be 60. Is that correct?
Okay, thank you, Campbell. Any further questions for Campbell?
Now, the only thing you might want to think about, Campbell, is maybe this should be for all new construction. Because to fix this, if somebody did have a problem, they're not going to run out and buy a new condenser. At least unless they are forced to. So it's one of those problems that is not easily corrected. It's not like a loud radio at a party. So I don't know. It's a difficult one.
Right. Okay, yes, I see that. That's why I had, based on Peter's recommendation, I had come up with a way to enforce where your first step would not be you have to go out and buy something new, but whereby you would, as they do now, make a verbal request that the noise be abated in some way. And, not with a specific way to do it. And as I understand the noise ordinance at this time and the way it's enforced, it's upon repeat offense that citations are given. And so that's, I guess, what I thought was going to happen. So
Okay,
that was my suggestion anyway on it.
okay, thank you, Campbell.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Campbell?
No.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this? In which case I'll close the public hearing portion and ask for a motion.
No, start motion not to adopt.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, further discussion on the motion?
I think this sets up just another, it lowers the bar for complaints, but enforcement is going to be equally untenable to the current situation. It's almost impossible to identify the source of the sound from that distance.
I mean, I also think that, this is basically a nuisance reporting sort of situation, and I just don't think the enhancements that Campbell wants to put in get you anywhere. It's still gonna be a situation where a neighbor has to call the police and complain. They have to come and measure as best they can, and, even under the current bylaw, they've got, 40 feet, 55 decibels, so if it's a machine that's making a ton of noise, they're gonna fail, and, I mean, if the neighbor wants to pursue it, the situation could result in a citation. But the fact of the matter is, it's only gonna happen when somebody complains. The police aren't gonna go around with a sound meter looking for noisy machines, so it's just not that high a priority in the list of things they have to do. So
Campbell,
all due respect to her efforts, I just don't think it adds anything to the enforcement of noise problems.
I've got it closed, but go ahead.
I think it's one that, you might want to think that the special town meeting that's coming up, you put a new article in, and the article is something more of, there has to be a sound barrier between that equipment and the next door neighbor, because that would cut it down substantially, and it'd be a very easy thing for people to do.
And the grandfathering.
Well, I don't know whether it should all be grandfathered. I don't know. To put in a fence in front of your air conditioner condenser, not a big deal,
Okay.
you know? So I don't know. That's something I have to figure out, but that might make a lot more sense than asking people to get new equipment essentially.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? In the motion in front of us is motion not to adopt. Okay, roll call, Stephen,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Joe, Peter,
Aye.
Jill,
I'm recused.
okay. Jeremy,
Aye.
Denise, I, thank you. Thank you, Campbell.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, outdoor lighting, Gail. So Gail sent around, I don't know if everybody had a chance to see the emails today with answers to the questions that she received. Did everybody get a chance to see them?
Yep.
I did.
I thought they were helpful.
Yes.
Okay, good. Further questions for Gail?
I was wondering if she could take us through that PowerPoint,
Which one?
the one with the examples. 'Cause I
Okay,
didn't really get a chance to look at it before the meeting.
okay. Gail, can you share screen and do that? Or
I-
does,
I- Yes, absolutely, I can do that. But I just wanted to say up front, in case I forget, in reviewing everything in preparation for this meeting, I realized that another change needs to be made to the article that if you move to adopt, I hope you can incorporate it. And that has to go to the effective date. In the article, I have it being effective at the time of the vote at town meeting if it's adopted. And I realized in retrospect, that doesn't allow the town time to set up the processes that would be required. So I would suggest that be changed maybe to January 1st of 2024, or if you thought the town needed even more time. Anyway, that date needs to be adjusted, and I apologize for that mistake. And that's on top of the two other changes that I notified you about that need to be made to correct some inconsistencies that I discovered after filing. So I just wanted to get that out of the way before I forget. Okay, so you would like me to walk you through, let me see. Okay, hold on one second. I gotta always remember how to do this. Okay, I have to start it first. Okay.
That's Stephen.
Yeah. Hey,
Me too.
I'm never bringing this.
Share.
I know, we don't need them, I know.
For some reason, it's not letting me, hold on.
She
I
said,
opened it up.
Do you need to grant Gail permission to be able to share her screen?
it's,
No,
or
it's letting me share, but I've got it on my screen, but it's not.
Maria has it, she can, or, no.
Yeah,
Well,
we
she-
know.
Have the presentation, is it the photos, is it the?
It's the one.
Yes,
called-
it is.
what
It's
is
called
it
estimated cost of compliance. So I have the PowerPoint version and the PDF version, and maybe the problem is it's not letting me share the PowerPoint version itself, but since it's the same, let me just pull that up. I'm so sorry. Just give me 1 second.
Is that from today?
Yeah, yeah. I think it was today.
Yeah, she mailed it this morning.
Want me to send it to
And-
you?
I can get it up again, I promise.
We just pull it
Okay.
up.
Eugene Clapp's trying to get into the meeting.
But then if I pull it up, then I can go back and forth, if I need to. So, okay, so let me see if that worked. It's just a matter of figuring out Zoom, and I'm not the best at share. Here we go. Ooh. Okay,
Hey,
yay, sorry. So it's not in PowerPoint form, so I'm not going to be advancing the slide, but I can use my cursor. So same point. So hand in hand with this was another document I can also pull up if you want to review, but it gives you some prices of products that would be bulbs and fixtures that would comply with the proposed bylaw if people needed to buy them. And those prices are.
Gail, hang on a second. I have to tell you, being at home, when you guys are all whispering, you can hear it. So this picks up everything and it's really distracting to hear the number. No, I never realized it till I sat at home on this the other day. And I went, okay, I want to just yell through the speaker, stop talking, I can't hear. So, okay.
Okay, ready?
Yeah,
Okay.
now, go ahead, Gail.
Okay, so as you guys, I'm sure will remember, I think it was Stephen asked me what's the estimated cost of compliance and what's the estimate for the number of houses that would have to make changes. And so I took that to heart and put this together. Now, this is not based on any kind of formal survey because I didn't have the money to do something like that. But so it's an informal survey. But what we found by the people I talked to is in the neighborhoods that I informally surveyed, about 30 to 50% of the houses have outdoor lighting that is in violation of one or more provisions of the existing bylaw and would also be in violation of the proposed bylaw. Hopefully that answers one of your questions. Here are the neighborhoods I surveyed. So I have 6 of them. These are neighborhoods that have lighting issues as has been reported to me. So I focused on those. It doesn't include neighborhoods that like Walwinet and Mattocket, which are relatively darker skies compared to these. Okay, so the most common problems observed, which is something else you wanted to know, everybody agreed, it's landscape uplighting, unshielded floodlights, and onion lights with high lumen bulbs. So landscape uplighting is prohibited under the existing bylaw altogether. It's prohibited under the proposed bylaw only if it's above 250 lumens. So there's more allowance for that in the proposed bylaw. Unshielded floodlights are prohibited under both the existing bylaw and my proposed bylaw. And onion lights with high lumen bulbs, under the existing bylaw, there's a 750 lumen cap. And the proposed bylaw, that becomes a 600 lumen cap. Here's some examples I was able to pull up from my own photos and photos sent to me over the last couple of years of examples of uplighting that, again, is in violation of the existing bylaw. To bring it into compliance with my proposed bylaw, you would just have to reduce the lumen output, or you could turn it off altogether. So here's the estimated cost of fixing that particular problem. Again, you could just turn it off, or you could replace a bulb. And I looked up some bulbs for this purpose that are specifically for this purpose and found that they're approximately $14 per bulb. There may be some that are less expensive, but that's the one I found. Here's some examples of floodlights that, again, are in violation of the existing bylaw, because under the existing bylaw, you're supposed to have everything shielded. And because there's such a glare, that's how you can tell that these are not shielded and pointed down. And the estimated cost of fixing that, I provided 2 options. There's this pretty cool shield that can be added to the floodlights if it's that kind of fixture where the bulb is exposed, and that provides the shielding. And that's relatively inexpensive. And I included the cost of new bulbs, because under the proposed bylaw, of course, it would have to be 2700 Kelvin or less, unless you couldn't find it for your fixture in question. I provided a second option where you just replace the fixtures. And here's the dual headed one. As you can see, the cost is $46 for that, which is not much more than adding the shields. But if somebody preferred, didn't like the look of the shields or just wanted to update their fixture, you could do that. And again, the cost of the bulbs. Then you get to the onion lights. So here's what's happening all over. Onion lights, I think people used to maybe have a 60-watt bulb or 40-watt bulb, I don't know. But when LEDs came out, these lights are just incredibly bright. I think people are using the equivalent of maybe a 100-watt bulb or something. They're so bright. So to fix that under the existing bylaw, or under the existing bylaw or under my proposed bylaw, you just need a different bulb, and found bulbs that $2 to $4 depending on the lumen output, but both of the bulbs I found would be under the 600 lumen cap for these. So then I to give you sort of idea of cost, as I said, I found it hard to figure out what the average house is on Nantucket because there's such a range in sizes and lighting trends. So I decided to sort of give you a few scenarios that maybe you could relate to. And the first would be like the homeowner only needed to change out bulbs for a few onion lights. That would be the simplest fix. And here's an example where maybe they had 4 onion lights. Maybe there's a front door and a side door, a back door, and they have 2 lights on each, or there's multiple entrances. I think 4 is actually a lot more than most people have, but because of the house you see in this picture, I think they have quite a lot. I put it at 4, but you can see the cost is only $16. The second scenario I did was, okay, say you needed to replace the lights for bulbs for onion lights, and then you also had some landscape uplighting like in the picture shown. So I added that to the cost, again, assuming you have 4 landscape uplighting. The cost, again, is very reasonable, $72. Scenario 3 is if you had all of what I've just discussed, but you need to also replace your floodlights or add the shielding. The pricing of this, I included actually new fixtures, but it would be close to the same if you added the shielding. And this is assuming 4 of each, which I think that's probably a moderate to big house. I think small houses wouldn't have this much. But even on this size of house that the example I'm giving you would be $164, not very reasonable. Now, the worst case scenario in terms of cost of coming into compliance would be the large properties where the homes are, you know, what I consider big, and maybe you have multiple structures. And so for this, I gave you an example of what 8 bulbs for your onion lights might cost, 8 for the, if you had 8 landscape uplighting fixtures, and then really generous, I added 10 floodlights, which seems possibly excessive, but this shows you, even if you did all that, it would be $604. And I think, you know, this is not going to be the price that people who, you know, the year rounders for the most part are going to pay. I mean, they're just not going to have houses of this size. And I really think that people who own houses this size, this is not going to be an issue for them. But even with those, I think, reasonable prices, you know, if anyone considered it an unreasonable hardship, I just want to point out you have a 5-year grace period, with the exceptions I've noted before. That can be extended to 10 years in some circumstances. That gives you time to maybe upgrade over time and spread out the expenses or save up your money. There may be rebates available for putting in LED lighting if it's replacing non-LED lighting. Those rebate programs change all the time, but come time for people to come to comply, they may get a rebate and not have to pay as much as even what I've said. And then, as I've mentioned before, the property owner could seek an administrative waiver if they found compliance with the new regulations an unreasonable hardship. And then I just want to mention 2 possibilities that I would be exploring if my proposed bylaw passes, and that would be some sort of financial assistance program to help those who, you know, would need help in complying. And I think a bulb giveaway is a distinct possibility, because I think bulbs are the biggest thing, and I'd really love to find somebody who would, you know, give me a grant or, you know, give me some money, and we could just give away bulbs to meet the requirements. So that is that. And I could also bring up the other, the related price list if you want, and if you want me to walk you through that, but that price list is where I came up with these prices that are included in this.
Thank you, Gail. Questions for Gail?
I mean, it's way less expensive than I thought it was going to be. I somehow imagine this being prohibitive for most people, but it turns out that it's light bulbs for the most part, and these shields that come over the floodlights, and these are already parts of the existing bylaw that are not being done, right? And it seems to me that, you know, we have looked at other sorts of articles that were, I mean, really about things that are not enforceable, but things that are about behavior change. And if we can, you know, get people to use different light bulbs and it's $6, that seems pretty reasonable. I did have a question for you, Gail. I saw something that said that you had to apply for a permit every year, or I didn't quite understand, like register every year, like I didn't quite understand that.
No, that would be, so the permit proposal is, it would be for any project that you're doing a renovation and need a building permit, or you have to get HDC permission, you would have your lighting, outdoor lighting plans reviewed at that point. It wouldn't be a yearly thing by any means.
I endorse this wholeheartedly in theory. But one thing you're not showing us anywhere is the difference in lighting in a house that's converted and a house that's not. And I'm not sure that 600 lumens is enough light in certain cases. I don't know. I'm just saying, I can't see it here. So,
so I did send you the picture. There was a, one of the documents I presented was the, what do you call it, before and after, or good lighting
No,
versus
I
bad
haven't seen it.
lighting.
I
You want me to pull
apologize.
that? Would you like me to pull that up?
You have it,
Please,
yeah.
Go ahead, Gail.
Sure. I realize I've hit you with a lot, but I was trying, you know, to answer all your questions, and this is one of the things you guys asked for. So I just gotta find my asset to FinCom. Just want to make sure I'm giving you the right version. Here we go. Now, I apologize for my dog. Okay, now I have to come back to screen share. Okay.
I see Jill has her hand up.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay, can you guys see this?
yeah.
Okay, so I did, so here's some examples of how much difference, you know, just having shielding makes, but then I did include an example. Oops, did I miss it? Sorry. I've worked with so many documents on this. Oh, here we go. So this one addresses, the one on the right has a 60, well, it's a 550 lumen, which is in between a 40-watt incandescent and a 60-watt incandescent for those who are still, you know, gauging brightness based on wattage. And as you can see, it's quite bright, and it does fall within the recommended lumen levels that Home Depot recommends for, you know, this kind of lighting. And according to the lighting experts I talked to, this is adequate. And keep in mind that some people have 2 onion lights, one on each side, so that would be double the light. Here's an example of lights that are over the 600 lumen. I can't even, I mean, they're very, very bright, and you just don't need that much. I mean, like that video presentation I provide you a link to, the president of IDA-MA, you know, pointed out that often people think you need more light than you actually need. And if you try these lower levels, I think you would find they're totally sufficient. And also keep in mind that you don't have to use these onion lights. There are other fixtures that are fully shielded that wouldn't have to come within that that wouldn't be subject to that 600 lumen cap. So if you felt additional light needed, you could provide, say, you know, you could put one above the up here or something, or replace one of your onion lights with a fully shielded one and have more lighting.
Thank you.
Did that answer your
Jill?
question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Gail. Jill?
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Jill.
I guess I was,
There you
sorry. I'm sympathetic to what you're doing, and I understand what you're trying to do, but a couple of things I wanted to know. One is, why did you address lumens and wattage so much and not just go for shielding? And was that because of the uplights on the trees? Or just saying that you can't have uplights? So that's my first question. And my other is, when I look at the pictures, they're very helpful. You did so much work. I really appreciate all that. It was very helpful. But sometimes when you look at the houses at night, you have some pictures with houses, well, the houses are fully lit with all their interior lights. And to me, that's actually, I couldn't even see that the exterior lights were causing any light pollution. So I don't know that, you know, when you have all your interior lights on and the exterior lights, how much more light pollution really is there?
Okay, so with respect to your first question, that was addressed also in that video presentation by the president of IDA MA. There's 4 aspects of lighting that need to be addressed, and they all go hand in hand. So just requiring shielding doesn't necessarily address all the problems, because some things are just too bright. And not only does that sometimes create glare and bright spots that could make it less safe. Even if you had shielding, it affects the shadows and the security around your home, but it's also just total energy usage. So so if you don't regulate lumens, you don't address all the problems of light pollution, because energy waste is one of them. The other was, the interior lights. Yeah, so you're talking, I'm sure, about that, the picture I had for that big house. And I actually found that online. It was part of a real estate ad. I didn't have any pictures of a compound that big to show you, unfortunately. And I didn't have time to have somebody go out and take one. But if I were to zoom in on that photo, you would actually see they have a couple of post top lights that are completely unshielded. They're just putting out a ton of light. I think they had some bright onion lights. I think there were some floodlights in the back. So I apologize for not being able to provide a better picture, but you just have to extrapolate from those other pictures I showed you where there wasn't any interior light, and just imagine that on a bigger property. Interior lights, I do agree, are some of the problem, but that was somebody asked me about that at the last meeting, and addressing even outdoor lighting is complicated. So to get to interior lighting, and that's a whole nother ball game, maybe to be done in the future. But that's also represents energy waste, and yes, it is contributing to some of the light pollution, but not as bad as some of the outdoor lighting we're seeing on the island now.
Okay, so I didn't know that energy waste was one of the big issues that you were trying to address. But could you walk us through one more time about the enforcement and the permitting?
Okay, so the permitting is a big part of the proposed changes to the enforcement provisions. So I'll tackle that first, but it's not the only part. Right now, there is no compliance review prior to installation of outdoor lighting, even though a lot of people think there is. It's not done as part of the building permit because the outdoor lighting regulations are not part of the zoning bylaw. So a lot of people are putting in excessive lighting and nobody's catching it. And then when people complain about it, then we don't have a lighting enforcement officer who has the time to enforce it. It's just not treated as a top priority, and the person who's assigned the duties is stretched thin, I think, with other duties. So the proposal is that when somebody has to get applies for a building permit and or has to get HDC approval, I'm not sure if those always go hand in hand, but in any event, if you have to go to either of those routes and your project involves outdoor lighting, you have to submit your outdoor lighting plans, and those would go to the lighting enforcement officer, who would review it and catch any violations. And certain things are required to be submitted so that he or she can make that assessment. This is actually in towns where lighting is regulated as a zoning bylaw, that would be already being done as part of the building permit process. It's just that we don't have that set up here. And I think it's a really important part so that people don't inadvertently violate the bylaw. You know, a lot of people rely on their agents, I guess their architect, their builders or whatever, electricians. And if those people don't know about the regulations, they could be violating them inadvertently. And then when you go to the expense of putting in all this lighting, and then somebody comes along and says, wait a minute, that's in violation. I think there's, less willingness to make changes at that point. And I did run into that. A good example is the Myacomet Golf Course. People complained about that lighting. And I went out with a lighting expert to check it. And the property manager was really surprised because he said, but wait, we just did this recently and we went through we got all the required permits. And I said, yes, but unfortunately it didn't involve a review of the lighting plans, and what you put in violates the existing bylaw in a couple of respects. And not only that, according to the expert who looked at it, it's actually they've created some very unsafe situation there because of the type of low bollard light that somebody along the way convinced them to install. But at that point, they were sympathetic, but they weren't willing to make changes because they had just put, I don't know when those renovations were done, but they weren't that long ago. And so it would have cost a lot of money. So having a compliance review up front, I just think would serve it would be part of the education, raising awareness of this and helping people, interpret the regulations if it's not clear to them. Though I would obviously undertake an educational campaign to bring architects, builders, electricians, everybody and homeowners up to speed. But if there were any questions about how to apply it, that would all be worked out in advance. So you don't have people violating it and then resisting making changes later.
But you said in yours for the permit, you want everyone to go get a permit now for existing houses that have COs? Because you said the permit was going to pay for an enforcement officer. So I didn't quite understand how to add it up.
Yes, that is a good point. I realized, and that has to do with the kind of the effective date too, wanting to change it. I realized, yes, over time, that's going to pay for it. But yes, initially it wouldn't, because it would have. So if it goes into effect, whatever it's January 1st or this fall, it applies from that point going forward with new constructions, new renovations. So at that point, whatever the effective date is, you're going to start collecting those fees, those permit fees. But yes, you have a very good point that that goes to the effective date. I realize that, wait a minute, that's not going to pay up front. So, but over time,
but for the 12,000 homes that we have on the island, they're not going to need a permit to have outdoor lighting.
Existing lighting?
Yeah.
No, you would only, if you only did some sort of major renovation that required a building permit. Otherwise,
So
you wouldn't have to get this permit.
So
Okay.
to that end, just a little bit of math always makes me happy. So there are, in an average year, there's 2,200 building permits issued. Of that, there's about 200 new builds. So 200 new builds at $100 a permit, that's $20,000. So that won't fund the lighting enforcement officer. Secondly, if the lighting enforcement officer has to issue the permit, that's 200. And during the year, there's 230 working days if you take out weekends, vacations, holidays. So he or she is basically issuing a permit a day. So
She didn't
there's,
say just new builds though. She said any reason to get a building permit.
right, I know, but I'm just using new builds as the least of it, right? So in the other part of this bylaw, it says that if the renovation is costing more than 50% of the assessed value of a house, then you need a permit for it as well. But I wasn't going to ask that question of the building permit or building department. So because I'm assuming, as we all know, the assessed value of most of the houses is significantly less than the market value. And secondly, the cost to build on this island is significantly more than, so I think you could get to 50% of the assessed value pretty quickly on a renovation is what I'm saying. So that would be probably double that number. And even at double that number, it's 40,000 a year. So, and it's a couple of permits a day for someone in addition to all the enforcement. So that's the math I was doing in my own head.
Yeah, if I may comment,
Mhm.
when I looked at this, I think this is asking for a 3-person office, not a lighting enforcement officer, because you add to that the waivers, the appeals.
Yeah.
All the
Yeah.
enforcement actions on top of what you just
Right.
talked about, right?
Right,
And
yeah.
we just.
Oh, yeah, I was just talking.
And we already
permits
said that
only.
30 to 50% of the island's out of compliance. Right, so that,
Yeah.
in terms of enforcement.
Yeah, no, I was just
Yeah,
trying to
okay,
do the math on
But-
how,
I'm trying to think of the overall expense of what you.
absolutely.
Yeah,
But I guess I feel like, most, certainly with new construction, I don't think it's unreasonable to submit a lighting plan and have it approved. Right, and also in terms of, look at how much structure we have around signs on Nantucket. Right, and the enforcement around signs. You can't tape a flyer to the inside of your store to your store door. You can't put a flyer inside the window of your store. You can't have sandwich boards. We are regulated down to the minutia on that, and somebody goes around and issues you a citation.
Who does that?
No one.
There's a
It's not-
signs committee for that. I mean, that's an appointed board.
But they can't issue a violation.
Yes, they can. Businesses that I've been.
No, it's a complaint-based system and people submit.
Stuff
photographs.
goes around and you get like a little ticket.
I don't know the name of that person. And I don't think I
Wasn't,
do.
well,
Mr. Ticket.
yes, I know, do know the name of that person.
Through
but
the
that's-
HDC.
Yes.
Oh, through the
but-
HTC.
Yes, but so my point is that we are so regulated on that single activity. Yet we have this whole other issue that's a much bigger issue that we're just kind of saying, oh, it's too much to enforce. Right, too much to enforce. But meanwhile, we have people policing people for decals on the inside of their doors. That doesn't make any sense to
And
me.
that only affects the store, doesn't affect anybody else, really.
Right, and it's a hardship on the store.
How many stores are there on the island versus how many houses are there on the island that would need to be policed?
Well, I think the policing is not really the issue, is what I'm getting at.
I think it's
There's not
exactly
power
the
That
issue.
is, I think.
I
it
think
is
it's the
that
whole
issue.
issue. I mean, you can have, I think that dark skies are important. We don't have landscape lighting in my house. In a subdivision that I'm involved in, we're putting dark sky compliant street lamps in. It's an important issue. How it can be effectively enforced is exactly the issue.
Yeah.
I mean, the current bylaw can't be enforced. The new bylaw doesn't set up a fee structure that would support the personnel that would be required to enforce it.
I get that.
So,
I do.
so what are we doing?
Something we.
I mean, unless a private industry is gonna come and say, you know, we're gonna fund this, then the town can't take it on.
I could put a bold tax on it.
Jeremy and Charlie, I see your hand up, but I want to get through all the finance committee questions first, and then I'll come to you. So Jeremy?
Yeah, I guess my understanding is that the town can impose a fee that reflects the cost. I seem to recall town council taking that, telling us that a few months ago. And so why should this be $100? If in fact it's necessary and it needs to be enforced, why shouldn't we price it properly? And so if we're talking about 400 houses that may need this, and maybe that's a low end, and you price this at $200 or $250 to get the net result we want, I don't see why we can't do that. Because
Well, what
as
do
I listen to everybody's concerns that are legitimate concerns, and we get to the enforcement issue, it seems like it's a cost issue. And so to me, as I listen to this, it's a question of what should the cost of the fee be?
Yeah, I don't think it's just a cost issue either. I think it's, you're creating a new enforcement department under the town manager. So I think the way this is called to set it up is also an organizational issue that needs to be taken into consideration as well.
That's a good point, but then it strikes me that every time we see an interesting, important challenge to be addressed, even when it is properly put forward, there seems to be a default position that comes back that says, oh, well, we can't enforce, so next.
Well, I
And I
think that's,
That's, I would actually say, thank you for saying that, and I don't agree with you at all. So, because for the simple reason that things that are very difficult to get done, when you want to get something done and you want change to happen, I'll go back to it's great that Santa Claus votes for Christmas, but you need the turkeys to vote for Thanksgiving. So it is important to get all the affected parties. I love that analogy.
I don't know.
It's important to get all the affected parties in the room to say, let's find a way to make this happen because it is the right thing to do. And I struggle in all my time on FinCom with having good ideas come across our desk that actually can't get implemented because they haven't been thought through to the logical conclusion. And you know, it's we've had stuff come before us before, which have gotten approved. And then the implementation is not the same as what everybody thought they were going to implement. And I don't know that everybody would have voted for these things had they none understood what the implementation is. So, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, right, there's similar analogies with what we just went through on the noise side, right? I think we have a recurring issue where because of the increasing crowdedness of Nantucket, people are frustrated with the urbanization of Nantucket and want to see something done and existing bylaws aren't being enforced. And so we're making more complicated, more difficult to enforce bylaws. That's not solving the underlying problem originally. You know, my issue, I think the concept is great. My concern actually is that everyone's going to vote for it, because I think everyone's going to think the concept is great, but that there's real issues within how it's being done. I mean, I would much rather see this within, you know, a revised charter to the HDC or put within a regulatory authority who can actually deal with the complexity of it. Because I'm uncomfortable with a general bylaw that this complex and that should probably be updated on a yearly basis. I think we're gonna be back here every year, right? Because of the technical aspects of this. And I'd love to see that sit within an existing regulatory body that is staffed. Granted, probably not staffed enough.
I was gonna say no such
Yeah,
thing
no,
exists.
fair enough. So with me, it's really the framework of this as a general bylaw without a reasonable mechanism. And for me, it's not just expense. I think Jeremy's point is a great one. You know, at some point, we need to figure out the stuff that needs to be enforced, and we need to find a way to pay for it to be enforced, whether it's through new revenue streams or not. But I've got just a lot of challenges with us putting it forward in this way. And I think, but I am concerned that it's gonna pass, and I don't, only because of the sort of intrinsic challenges within it. So I think we need to dig into thinking what our motion is going to be, because I think there's some unworkable parts in here we're going to get saddled with if it passes in this regard, including, for instance, a total train wreck on the building permit side. If this is going to start holding up building permits because the map that you said can't get done and people can't get through the HTC and can't get through the plan department because the lighting enforcement guy's got a stack of 50 of these on his table, we're going to have a real problem as well. And then just the last comment I would make, I'm a little reticent to not take the chief of police's words into account a little bit about, you know, he sort of made the statement for him, there's a law enforcement problem in here, and we haven't really fleshed that out and understood that. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Okay, other questions from FinCom before I turn it over to Charlie?
I mean, I guess I totally hear the regulatory part. I mean, I also think about the other things that we passed as a way of encouraging behavior change, right? Like think about the wipes, right? We supported eliminating wipes. Who is enforcing wipes not being flushed down the toilet? We did this as a behavior.
It
change.
can't be sold here.
Right, I understand, but it was the same thing with the, but people are still bringing them on the island and flushing them down the
But that
toilet.
wasn't the bylaw. You're allowed to bring them on the island.
Well, it
Kids
doesn't.
can't fly them on the island.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it is the same thing with the plastic water.
So,
bottles.
so why doesn't this go to the installers?
To like enforce it. If the sewer department wanted it to happen.
Well, it was gonna cost us money.
When we wanted fertilizer regulated, we went to the people who apply the fertilizer. This doesn't address the people who are installing the lights at all. Nobody's out there installing lights on the outside of their house because they can't, because you need a permit and a license. That's where this should be addressed.
The electrician should.
Yeah. Yeah, educate the community of the people who are putting these lights in place.
The builders, the architects, yeah.
Gail, I have a question for you. Charlie, I'll get to you in a second, I promise. I haven't forgotten you. So you put a 5-year runway, except if any of the following occurs, which is somebody, the official appointed to oversee the enforcement of this chapter determines it's a lighting nuisance. So if I live next door to Stephen and I make a complaint, he has 30 days to change that light, even though there's a theoretical 5-year runway here. So this is really allowing the people who complain to get the neighbors to comply. So whilst I appreciate you put 5 years in here, it actually isn't 5 years for the people who are neighboring the people who are complaining. Is that a true interpretation? Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think basically it is. And that exception was to address instances where the lighting is so bad that it's causing light trespass, but there is a metric that it would have to satisfy. It can't just be based on a complaint. So the metric is set that means that light is really shining onto somebody else's property. And again, if that happens, the people, the lighting could be probably quickly resolved by replacing the light bulb or redirecting a floodlight or adding shielding. And then the glare part is actually a public safety hazard. I mean, it's not just a nuisance. It's a real safety hazard if somebody's light is, is possibly,
Yeah.
causing a chance for harm. So, so yeah, that's why those were exceptions were made.
Okay, thank you. Charlie,
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Charles Stott, and I'm co-president of the Nantucket Civic League, which is a federation of 25 neighborhood associations with about 2,000 members. Last month, we sent you a letter of support for Article 76 after our executive committee voted unanimously to endorse the proposed outdoor lighting bylaw. Since that time, I've become aware of 6 of our neighborhood associations which have endorsed this warrant article. You will be relieved to know that I will not take the time to repeat all of the reasons why the Civic League and other associations support the adoption of the outdoor lighting bylaw amendment. But I do wish to make one observation, and that is to surmise that there is much broader support than that of the Civic League and 6 neighborhood associations. Many of the other 19 Civic League member associations have constitutions or other governing documents that require a vote of their governing boards or even the membership at their annual meeting before a policy position may be taken. So while some leaders may well have liked their associations to have taken a supportive position, they were restrained from doing so. In summary, we in the Civic League encourage a favorable recommendation from you on Article 76. Thanks for your consideration.
thank you, Charlie, and thanks for your patience. Chris?
Yeah, I just make an observation since he's raising the feedback we've gotten and we've seen those letters and we've gotten a ton of them. I mean, one of the things that's been striking about them is most of them I've read that have specific examples in them are all covered by the current bylaw. That are all the things that are brought up as sort of egregious examples in those letters. So I've been, and I would go back to the sort of the supporters who were in the room here the last time who said, got a little frustrated, I think, with my questions. And like, it's not that complicated, just point your lights down, which is a great answer. And it's what the current bylaw says, by the way. And so I think the challenge I'm having is jabbing up the feedback and the people that are commenting that seem largely, as I think we all are, in favor of better protection of dark skies on Nantucket and better adherence to this of people. It's not tying to me in the amendment to the bylaw, at least in a lot of the feedback I've read. I'm sure it's not true of all of it, but just an observation.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions? Gail, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to, there's a couple of things I would like to respond about if I could. One is to correct it seems to be a misimpression. So the permit process wouldn't hold up the building permit process or the HDC approval process because their approvals aren't contingent on what the LEO does. It just means that when it comes to outdoor lighting, the homeowner and his agent, her agent wouldn't be allowed to
Can I stop you right there? You can't get a permit without HDC approval.
Right, HDC could go ahead and approve. They in terms of lighting, they look at style of the lighting. It has nothing to do with what fixture color temperature you get or what lumen, what bulb you put in. They're just reviewing it for style. So they could go ahead and do that. That's nothing about the proposed permit process would hold that up. Then I think, Chris, your last one, the complaints could be addressed by enforcing the existing bylaw. I don't think that's quite true. One, people complained about so much lighting being left on all night, and there's nothing in the existing bylaw that has a curfew except for it's been construed for non-residential athletic lighting. So that would add that. But I think
do you mind if I'll do the moderator,
Please.
Of course, through the chair, of course, but not true of anything that's deemed safety and security as long as it's within the lumen limits and isn't called out to the specific examples of landscape, string, rope, decoration, or accent. And I do think this is another area where you're gonna have a lot of people in contention saying, hey, I'm in compliance with the bylaw because this lighting is safety and security that's on after the curfew. I just raised this now because I just wanted to address your curfew point.
Okay, so yeah, I'm glad you raised it because then I can address directly. So what the current bylaw does is has lumen limits on that security lighting now. So, you know, if it is on all night, it's going to be a lot lower brightness. And the current bylaw only addresses brightness with respect to, I think it's mostly commercial property, non-residential property, because it turns on those foot candle measurements and the International Illuminating Engineering Society recommendations, which are very technical. So that's not, residences aren't held to that. So I think the proposed bylaw would address that issue, and also color temperature. It's so important to regulate color temperature now because that also affects how the light is perceived. Because of the way this blue light interacts with the eyeball and all that, it comes across as much brighter, even at the same lumen level as an incandescent. So the harm of color temperature really wasn't known back in 2005, and it's not addressed in the current bylaw. So, and then the current bylaw doesn't have, when you're talking about lumens, an overall lumen limit to sites or fixture limit. So I guess I have to disagree with you a little bit that all the problems or most of the problems that were reported could be addressed by enforcing the existing bylaw. But speaking of that, I mean, you know, Libby Gibson's email yesterday in response to what I just submitted, she basically answered the question you guys have, you know, whether the existing bylaw was being enforced or not. And she admitted it wasn't because there is no lighting enforcement officer that has the time to do that. So you're still getting into a resources issue. And the other thing I guess I want to point in here somewhere, I feel like it's relevant to some of the comments made, was with the clearer metrics and clear definitions, no inconsistencies like in the current bylaw, I just think you're going to have a lot more voluntary compliance. And especially if I undertake, you know, an educational campaign, which I intend to do. So I think it's really important to have the right rules, the current standards on the books, because right now the code is so badly outdated. So even, you know, people might comply with that and might address some problems. It's not going to address all of the problems with light pollution that are known now. And then enforcement, I also just wanted to say, this is not like some of the other enforcement problems. It really does, it comes down to it. I think somebody said this, is just having the right personnel, but you know, the metrics are there. This is not, I tried to make the standards where homeowners could readily understand them. I know there are a lot of them, but when you break it down, they're easy to understand and they are enforceable. I mean, there are clear objective metrics. So I don't think it's like some of the other enforcement issues you guys mentioned, but it does come down to having enough personnel and maybe, you know, my math, I don't have all the background you guys do, so I trust your math, but if it takes a 3-person office, I think, you know, we've got to do it. It's just so important that we not lose this, you know, this special resource we have. I think that would just be tragic.
Can I ask one more
Chris,
question?
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No, it's okay.
Has there been a large scale education campaign done on this? I mean, I think that, by the way, is an excellent idea. Whether it's relative to the current bylaw or just relative to good citizenship. This would seem to be something you could, you know, probably get funded through philanthropy and kind of make a big deal out of it, raise people's awareness of it. I'm just curious if it's been
Wondering
done.
if we know anybody at Mariah Mitchell that could help with that.
So I, ever since I founded Nantucket Lights, and this was the reason I was encouraged to found it, we've had, there's a brochure I've put, I have this extensive website that explains all this, trying to get people to voluntarily comply with the existing bylaw. But it's awkward because I say, you know, at a minimum, comply with the existing bylaw. That's what's on the books. And you could be, you know, penalized if you don't comply. But more importantly, you should comply with the 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting that even the lighting industry agrees to. So when you have these out, you know, I guess the direct answer to your question is yes. For now, almost 2 years, I've undertaken an educational campaign, and to the extent that, you know, I've been able to afford it. With respect to the proposed bylaw, what I plan to do between now and town meeting is have public forums and a place that people can ask questions and answer them. And then if it passes, I plan to undertake, and hopefully with the town cooperating, webinars, in-person seminars, whatever, for property owners, architects, builders, landscapers, everybody who, might be involved. And also working with the local lighting suppliers, so that there are hopefully, in there's a corner where it says dark sky, compliant, and help them stock the right product. So yes, I plan to do a lot of education. I wish the town, the bylaw, the existing bylaw was passed in 2005, and really the town, as far as I can tell from the history, has done nothing to raise awareness about it. It got on the books and then nothing was done. If you go on the website and plug in lighting enforcement officer, nothing comes up, because even under Marcus's entry in the directory, he's just listed as the coordinator for zoning compliance. So just on the website, you can't even tell who you should complain to. There's no complaint form that mentions it. There's nothing. And so that was one reason I started taking all this on, even before, I proposed a bylaw with, let's just get people complying with the existing bylaw. That would be a start. And I have found it very difficult to reach everybody. But I will be doing my darndest to educate everybody. And I would hope the town would join in. I think, Mariah Mitchell, maybe, they would help join in. And I,
Gail,
and
did you talk to the bulb manufacturers? I mean, to me, a way to start, get one of the bulb manufacturers to come in and say, I'm going to give you guys 3,000 bulbs for free, because I want to make an example of Nantucket that I can use in my advertising or whatever. And it gets us free advertising, and it gets them a dark town, and it gets the people who live here free bulbs. So,
well, that's what I had in mind when I said the bulb giveaway program. And this was an idea I had before, even with the existing bylaws, like, okay, even though the existing bylaw says this, really, these are the kind of bulbs you should use. I just, it's on my long to-do list, but I love that idea of going to a manufacturer to do this. And the more I'm at this, the more contacts I have with people that I hope, to be able to convince them to provide bulbs for free. And even maybe some shielding for those floodlights.
Just one more quick one, and maybe hopefully there's a quick answer to it. You mentioned in your responses that zoning wouldn't be a good idea to do this through, because of they would let the school off the hook that's currently in non-compliance. What would it, since that seems like a pretty big issue if the school's in non-compliance, one of the larger parking lots that's on 24/7. Do you know what it would take to, is that a fixture replacement? Is that a bulb replacement? What would it take to bring the school at least into compliance?
Well, the biggest thing they could do and to comply would be, I think all their outdoor lighting now is LED. I think it's all been converted for the most part. And I never was able to get the specs, but typically on the new fixtures for like parking area and stuff, there's what's called a 7-pin connector that you could put a lighting control on it. And that would be to dim it down to 50% when activity is not detected. I think that's just add-ons. That I don't think would be expensive. I don't think there were just a few fixtures that they were drop down fixtures that are in violation. Those wouldn't be expensive to replace. Interestingly, under the existing bylaw, there's a height limit for their poles, which they're in violation of, and that would have cost a lot to fix. The proposed bylaw takes out any reference to pole heights, because IDA has decided that is not like a critical factor anymore, as long as you have the shielding and the right color temperature and the right lumen output.
So the main issue with the school though is the inability to dim, and that I guess requires motion detection.
That would be the biggest, but color temperature, I know that I think they put in 4,000, maybe 3,500, which is too bright. But I would say, since they did that not so long ago, replacing those just because of color temperature might fall under the hardship thing, where they would get some more time to comply. But there's no reason they couldn't go ahead and put some dimmers and motion detectors in.
Okay, thank you.
Gail, I have just under the request, no, not request for enforcement, under the permitting, hold on a second, let me find my notes. Something about if you don't get your permit approved in 35 days, it is denied. That's and I just, again, I'm going back to, within 30 days of submission of the lighting plans or additional information requested, the Leo shall issue a permit stating the lighting plan conforms to the requirements or denying. And then if a permit's not been issued within 35 days, the application shall be deemed denied. You know, that's the beauty of a 17-page citizens warrant article, is there's many things to look at. And that timing, just, I don't know what the timing is at the building department for getting things done, or therefore the permitting process. I don't know if 30 days is enough time. I don't know if, you know, because if it's denied, then you're going to go through an appeals process, which is, again, administratively heavy.
Taxing.
And so, you know, some of the things in here, not to say that they aren't necessary, but to say they may not be executable, even if tomorrow there was magically a 3-person department on lighting. So I'm curious as to why you picked 30 and 35 days.
Honestly, that was the suggestion of the town council. And I was modeling it after, I think, other provisions in the bylaw. I forget which one now.
Okay.
But that could easily be, you know, that's the kind of easy fix. You could, if you don't think 30, you know, make it 90 days or whatever, you know, it's like, that's something you could easily, if you move to adopt, could say on the condition that that's changed. I mean, that's the kind of thing that's easy to adopt. But honestly, when I was doing it all, I kind of deferred to the town council and the other provisions I found. But
Okay.
if you don't think that's realistic, you know, I actually think, you know, if people provide the lighting plans with, you know, it has all the specs in it, it's not going to be hard for somebody who, you know, becomes very familiar with the requirements and maybe has proper training to quickly look at it and say, yep, that complies. Yep, that complies. I don't think it's going to be that time consuming.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, even I could probably rule on one very quickly.
There was, I think,
Sounds like you just applied for the job, Gail.
if I read
No, no,
correctly, the more egregious one that struck me was, if I read correctly, any decision by the lighting enforcement officer can be appealed to the town manager, bilaterally by either side.
Yeah,
Well-
that's probably not.
This is gonna be Libby's full-time job.
There's
Well,
several
Libby
things.
could designate somebody else to handle the appeals. But the problem with the setup now is what's happening is people complain and the lighting enforcement officer, for whatever reason, could be because he's too busy, just doesn't do anything and there's no recourse. And then there have been instances that have been made aware of that
Several.
he's made certain interpretations of the existing bylaw that, as a lawyer who used to regulatory language, I'm saying, how did you even, that's not even a reading of the plain language, but I had nobody to formally appeal to. And then you've got people who, like, maybe they're going to get a citation, if that's what you call it, and they disagree and it looks like he's being completely arbitrary and, you know, has a vendetta against him, you know, whatever the reasons, you know, it just seems like it's a good governance that there should be some oversight to these decisions, and that people who have light shining into their bedroom, you know, like some of the complaints you've gotten, they should have some recourse if the lighting enforcement officer just refuses to do anything.
I don't disagree about recourse. I'm just saying, I think, again, it's the devil's in the details of the way this particular article is written, that I don't think that particular recourse works. So, you know, that's just another example of, I totally agree with the overall concept, but have a hard time with a lot of the.
Well, what I suggested, if it becomes too much of a burden, that that maybe you could have a separate, I don't know, board of appeals. I don't know how quite that works. That would have to be an amendment made later on. But maybe you do designate some some separate body that takes all of this so that she's not burdened by this. But honestly, when I said, I talked this through with town council and I said, well, maybe the appeal should go directly to the select board or, you know, whatever. And he said, no, I think I would have it go through Libby because she's his or her supervisor.
Well,
Like,
he's also,
well, okay.
but Gail, town council would give you that opinion because that's probably legally the right way to structure it and organizationally, but it doesn't mean it's the most effective way.
Or,
So-
or even possible.
Realistic.
Yeah, realistic, that's the word. Thank you, Joanna. Okay, any more questions for Gail?
Question.
Can I
for-
just say one more thing? I don't know if I've said this before, but okay, say it passes and the town, other than the permit process, which is a clear duty, like does nothing to enforce. There is value in having the right rules on the book because you need that to even hope for voluntary compliance. And I think there would be more voluntary compliance with clearer
Yeah.
rules and education campaign.
Yeah, I don't agree. I mean, as somebody who invested the time to educate myself and purchase dark sky compliant street lamps, I don't know if there's any requirement to do it. I didn't consider whether there was or there wasn't. I just thought that was the right thing to do. So
Yeah.
voluntary compliance does exist. And I think education helps that.
Well, wouldn't it be voluntary compliance if this is on the books, but we don't have anybody enforcing it? That's
Well,
voluntary.
but I also look
But
at it, I
but
look
if
at it,
this is on the books and we have, some period of time where you're gonna be in violation of the law because you didn't get your permit approved, and then you have to appeal to the town manager or their office or some group that we haven't even imagined what they'll look like yet, some other regulatory body, there is real consequences, even if there isn't somebody out there enforcing it. There's a whole permitting process aspect that needs to be complied with.
Well,
my
maybe-
favorite example of voluntary compliance is the straws. It didn't need a bylaw. It didn't need, it started as a grassroots, let's get rid of plastic straws. And within a short period of time,
All but a
nearly
couple
all of,
places,
all of the places on the island got rid of their plastic straws. So I think there is an appetite for doing the right thing in the general population without necessarily saying, well, here's a bunch of rules, and oh, by the way, do the right thing. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have rules. I'm just saying that I've seen the opposite, that people will voluntarily comply to do the right thing.
Well, maybe the issue is to not rewrite this, so you have 4 different things and that's it, and resubmit this at a further town meeting. And very simple, without the permitting and without the enforcement person, more as an educational tool.
I'd encourage anyone, if you haven't, to go back and look at the existing bylaw. It's a pretty good bylaw. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it
But
doesn't need
it's
to be
not
updated in
enforced
some
all
ways.
though, right? Yeah.
But it's, to me, it's a lot clearer what one needs to do.
What is our
Well,
current?
Sorry, if you looked at my very extensive detailed, I compared the
Yeah.
existing bylaw to current, and it's not a good bylaw. I just have to really disagree with you there. It's confusing, it's contradictory. Their terms aren't defined. There's an internal contradiction where basically when one place it says there's no uplighting at all, and then in other places it allows, it says partial shielding is okay. So it was good at the time, but it's not good now. It's just not.
I just, the only thing I can throw in here is, I think this article is gonna pass at town meeting. I mean, it just strikes me as the kind of article that the attendees will, react positively to, and it will probably get through. I also think the enforcement side of it is flawed, and we're gonna end up with, and I'm very impressed with the amount of work that's been done, and it's one of the best structured, I don't want to say it that way, one of the best organized and justified articles that I've seen in a long time on the FinCom. But I just think that, Libby and the town government has a list of 100 priorities, and all due respect, Gail, I just think this is going to slide down to number 99. I mean, there's an awful lot for the town to do, and I just, but maybe voting it in place, and, it's at least a baby step in the right direction. I don't know. I find myself torn, so.
I think this article necessitates staff, and I think 3 people is probably the right amount of staff. And if it came out and asked for that, then I think we would have given this article the same commentary that we gave to the request for new HTC administrator, which is, this isn't the appropriate way to add new staff people.
But that's not where this,
But it's
not
not,
where this was coming from. This was coming
Yeah,
from.
but this does require staff, though. I mean, it.
But
But
it
I
does-
didn't specify how many staff, the town needed to hire. I mean, in fact, that's the reason I didn't. I think that would have been micromanaging. But if you have position and regulations to enforce, I think it's incumbent on the town manager to find a way to enforce it effectively. If
Well, that's-
people vote for this at town meeting, I
Come
just
in,
think,
you say, is it feasible for the town to do it with its budget and with the personnel that it has? We've got, what was it,
Well-
56 unfilled town positions right now for existing jobs. And now we're gonna add some more with some special qualifications needed. And presumably housing needed and benefits and everything else. I think that, is part of the equation here.
Any further questions for Gail before I close the public comment portion of our discussion? May I have a motion to close public comment?
So moved.
Second.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you, Jill. Stephen? We're motion to close. We have to do the roll call.
Aye.
Thank you. Chris?
Aye.
Joanna?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Hi,
Thank you. Denise, I. Okay, is there a motion on the table? Are we
Yeah,
ready to make a
it's-
motion?
It's so difficult because I think unanimously, we all agree it's a problem. And I think unanimously, we all would agree that there's no way to enforce it currently. So, how do we vote again, we vote not to adopt, how do we present our case?
Yeah, I think that the likelihood that this is going to pass is very high.
Right.
And I think for that reason, we need to take some time, look at the provisions that are going to make this untenable for town administration. And we need to strip those out. And in our positive recommendation to pass the article, it's a version that could be more easily administered by the town.
Good idea.
And it was interesting that the proponent raised the day. That was one of the first thoughts I had too, is if we were gonna take that approach, one of the things is, I don't see how you can put this in place until the beginning of the next fiscal year, because I think you're gonna have to spend
I
some
would say
kind of money one way or another. We're gonna have to find a way to spend the money, and we can't do that until 2020.
So you guys are suggesting that we attempt to fix the article versus, because we fear that it's gonna pass and we can put some better structure to it?
Yeah, I think
I don't think we fear.
Gail made the
That's
point
what I-
that
Yeah.
having something on the books is better. It's a resource that people can look to and as a guide for, what is the best thing to do. I think that's a great notion, and I think we should keep those aspects of the article. There's some aspects about requiring permits. We don't have anybody who's qualified or has the bandwidth to review all those applications right now. So I think that should be taken out. Certainly any timelines like that need to be taken out. And we probably need to look at a further date, like the beginning of fiscal year, 2 years from now.
Yeah.
In order to have all this go into effect.
I mean,
But in
I-
the meantime,
Makes sense.
we've got a big discussion about what's right to do. And we can point to the bylaw in the same way we did with plastics. The plastics ban took a year and a half after it was passed. But in the meantime, people knew to prepare for it and they knew exactly what the new restrictions would be.
I would want town council's opinion, but for example, as I flip back through the pages, you could almost say, you start at the beginning and talk about what light bulbs and all this kind of, lumen limits, correlated color temperature, illumination of signs and flags. So this is the best practice stuff, right? And then sports lighting, street lights, public lighting. And then I would say the rest of it drop, the prohibitions, the enforcement, the permits, the appeals. Because that's, with the idea that you're going to get the right things on the books for people to understand what they should be doing. And then take off the punishment side of the equation and then come back at a further town meeting if the punishment side of the equation needs to be beefed up. So I think that's a nice compromise. At least from my perspective, to Stephen's point. Because I think, moving us closer to maybe not perfect dark skies, but darker skies is the right thing to do for the island. I fully agree with that. And, we don't have on outdoor lights on purpose, like Stephen, we have the right lighting outside. When we have it on, and except I do still have my Christmas lights up, Gail. I haven't gotten them down yet, so, do you want to drive by and put me on the,
Left the cups on her.
We will find her today.
yeah, exactly.
So we're thinking about motion to adopt, but then proposing a comment. It sounds like could be one of the bigger comments we've ever.
Yes.
I mean,
Well, it's
Our motion is just gonna list the bylaw, but it's gonna strip out certain aspects.
Yes.
In the-
motion to
in the
adopt
same way we
up
did with
into
Mr.
102.
Barnes' article, we rewrote the proposal in our motion.
that was a couple of sentences this time.
I'm really starting at 1026-6 prohibitions. I'm saying all the rest of, motion to adopt up until
Enforcement, all that
102.
stuff, Exemptions.
6 prohibitions. Possibly,
I think we really have to sit down, let's look at it in that.
and see if that's
Yeah,
possible,
yeah.
but I also would want town council's view. I'd also want the moderator's view, because frankly, this is the
Well,
most change we've ever made to an existing article.
well, maybe Gail would be willing to work with us and adjust her own article.
It's an interesting point.
So I would be willing, so you give me your guidance and I would be willing to redraft it. I don't think you can get rid of all the enforcement. I mean, you have to replace it with something. Even if you just use the language of the current bylaw.
You
Sorry.
just say to be determined
Well,
enforcement.
we can leave something akin to
So
what's.
if you look at the existing bylaw, the enforcement sections are just a few generally. It designates a lighting enforcement officer to enforce. It sets a penalty and that so forth. But you need effective date, you need some of these other things. So anyway, if I would do that. I mean, not that that's would be my preference, but I would help you. How did you say it? Strip the parts that you find problematic. But with the understanding, I wouldn't necessarily agree with them. Like I might lobby for how I have it, but I would be happy to help you.
I mean, the other alternative is we end up with motion not to adopt. As
Right.
is, because we just can't, or we may end up
No,
with
I-
motion to adopt with nobody voting for that.
Or,
So-
or we could take no action.
And at the same time, I look at this comment that Stephen made earlier that let's say it passes at town meeting, now the town's got an
I
issue.
don't disagree.
Right,
I'm just saying, I think that at a certain point, people are gonna get confused,
yeah,
right? And which is the thing? Right? Because even if we strip away what we don't like, it could very well be that they get up and say, oh, no, we want this other
Yeah, they
thing,
can call.
right?
Recommend it.
Oh.
Well, that's
sorry,
a possibility no matter what.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I
Sorry,
just said, noticed
together.
that Denise, you said cut out 1026 prohibitions on down. Those prohibitions are basically in the existing bylaw already. They might be phrased a little tiny bit. I added a metric that to define light and trespass that wasn't there, I think, wasn't clear before. But, and then you need certain exemptions because if you don't have those exemptions, then a lot of things that you don't want subject to these regulations. So anyway, I think what you're talking about is 1028 down, 1028 and 1029, I would say, and 10210 to change the effective date. That I'm totally fine with, because I admitted that mistake first, at the
Yeah.
upfront.
Okay. I think we won't decide that today. Unless everybody has an appetite to decide that today.
No.
No.
I think we have to go back and read it and.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's too important. I mean, there's some,
Well, why don't, I mean, not that I'm looking for extra meetings, but, I mean, I'd have to read, to write a comment, I'd have to read it much more carefully than I have, and, I think, I don't know, do we want to can we get the FinCom together and go through it line by line, I mean, and sort of create the comment, or
Make a
we want to
subcommittee.
assign it to the usual comment writing team?
no, I think we need group input, and I think, Gail's volunteered to work with us. She can come to a public meeting and we can, be on Zoom and, get public input on it also. I mean, we're gonna end up where we end up as a committee and vote with what we want to. But I think we do need some help in structuring this, because I'm not a lighting expert. I don't know which things are, gonna make this so far from attractive to the proponents of the article that our version's not going to pass. That's, then all of our effort in that case would have been wasted.
Now,
So we need to keep the kernel of what they need.
I'm wearing my Jeremy hat on his behalf, saying, Denise, you've told me 12 times, we don't fix things.
Yeah.
We just make motions on them.
Well,
And
I'm
so
in
now
the
we're-
business of preventing the town.
By the
future
way,
problems.
Denise, I think fixing things is good.
We know.
know you, Jeremy, and we've never let you do it before, so I'm also acknowledging the irony here.
Yes, well, here we're saving the town significant expense in the near term.
It's
So I
gonna be
think
on
an
the
exception
table
needs to be made.
regardless, so we might as well
Yes.
try to make it right.
Okay, all right, so, I think we can do it in the meetings we have left,
March 9th.
March 9th, but just be prepared.
I will not be here.
Oh,
Either way.
That's not acceptable.
you want to do it? No, we can't do it.
Okay, then, March.
Denise, I will be available, but it'll be by Zoom.
Yeah, that's okay, Jeremy.
Jeremy, they didn't tell you how to live here year round?
I mean,
Well,
we
I
should-
do live there year round.
March 7th,
Yeah,
March 7th?
So,
Of that week, raising money for the hospital.
I will
yeah,
also be.
we have with Disney.
It is-
Oh, my God, you have to win something.
13 is.
Denise, can I just ask sort of a normal, well, I guess a process question?
Sure.
We got the select committee as our political entity outside of town meeting. If a problem is defined very well and everybody likes it, does one first go to the select committee to get resources to deal with that, or the process to enforce it? Or is it supposed to go through through Libby's department?
So the select board, well, Jason's actually on, he could answer that probably more eloquently than I am. The select board has a strategic plan and strategic imperatives. And then as issues arise that the town manager then brings to the select board, or citizens bring to the town manager or to select board members, they then deem how much work it takes and what needs to happen, and should they form a committee and what work should they do on it. So this is the reason that we're in this discussion, is because it's a citizens warrant article. And as you know, we have to make a recommendation for the voters at town meeting. So could this have gone through the select board in a different way? Yes, potentially it could have. Jason, do you want to jump in and be a lot more eloquent than I was on that?
Well, I think if this passes, the select board doesn't have much to say except maybe prioritizing for the town manager, town admin. Like if we're gonna do this now, what comes off the table? But the town manager would decide how they're gonna implement it, how they're gonna find the resources, how they're gonna, the enforcement. We wouldn't have much say in that.
No, I meant if, to Jeremy's question of if somebody just brought a issue to you.
yeah.
In general, not via citizen warrant article.
Yes. Yeah, we could create policy on that, but something as detailed as this, we'd have to really. Either have a committee or a work group and find who's gonna own it. That's usually what happens when something comes to us, is who's gonna own this. And so
Yeah.
even if this gets passed through the town meeting, who's gonna own this? Because
Right.
it umbrellas a couple different things.
So last comment, Denise, just fixing things is always a great way to get to compromise, I find, but it almost seems as if when all these problems are sort of identified and presented, this is something for maybe later this year, but wouldn't it be different if there was a process in place to make sure that the enforcement and the resource issues might be dealt with before we all weigh in on this?
Oh, that was my earlier comment when this article was discussed, was that if everybody had already held hands together and came to an answer, this would have been a much simpler process.
Exactly.
So, yeah, yes, you're absolutely correct, Jeremy. And it's, as people write citizen warrant articles, some of them come to us that way and some of them need a little bit more work. Let's just phrase it like that. So, okay, so what we've done is I'm looking at the upcoming meetings and the, what day? The 20th. Gail, how about this? And I don't know, and everybody can yell if this is inappropriate. With all the feedback you've gotten tonight, could you take a first stab at what would be a compromise that you felt that this FinCom could support based on our feedback? And then we could discuss it again on the 23rd and see if that gets us close enough. And then otherwise, the group will get back together. And you'll be writing it as if you're a member of the FinCom and it's motion to adopt in this structure. So you've just become
Right.
the FinCom member of FinCom. Congratulations.
Yes.
I'm just looking. So you're saying actually next, but it was 1 week that I have to do
In
that.
1 week from today.
Yeah, I could do that.
And if
That
you're
is-
gonna like this even better, could you get it to us before, like, say, on the Tuesday, so we have a couple days to read it and think about it before we have to discuss it again as a group?
221, okay. So I just to make sure I'm clear on my homework, I do it as a motion to adopt, but with lots of the changes that you've talked about.
Correct.
Yes, I can do that. So I do cross outs and basically I think what you want to do is go back to, it's going to be like a, it's going to
Here's
be
all the
marrying
Here's all
marrying the
really
current
fun-
bylaw with the enforcement provisions of the existing bylaw, it sounds like. So it shouldn't be too hard. It shouldn't be
Exactly.
too hard. It shouldn't be too hard. So yes, I can meet that deadline. That's Tuesday.
Yeah,
Yes.
by end of business on Tuesdays, because that'll give us Wednesday and Thursday to look at it before we discuss it again, and then we'd like you to obviously come back on the 23rd.
And can
again,
you tell me in terms of effective date, so I can change that date? What would when does the fiscal year end? What's the date you wanted to become
if-
effective? So
If we're able to fashion this in such a way that it's not likely to require another person, then I think the effective date can be very soon.
Yeah, we can do
Okay.
it July 1st,
Yeah,
2023. Let's do January 1st, 2024, just in case there's anything that the
That'll-
town needs to make some
that'll
adjustments to.
give the time for the Attorney General to review it and make it official
Okay.
anyway, so.
And all I was gonna say, is we're looking for here is to try to adopt what's good in the updated regulations that Gail has put into the proposed bylaw, but try to relieve some of the, we call
Administrative
it burden on the town to try to staff up and implement all this stuff until some later date.
Well, that could be phase two.
Yeah,
right?
that could be, yes.
Right, like this is
Yeah.
phase
And
one.
I have-
Phase two.
one more question for you, Denise. You talked specifically about the exceptions made to the grace period. Is the consensus I should take those out as well?
No, if that's in the existing bylaw, Gail, you can leave those there.
That's prohibitions. No, I was talking about, well, light trespass and glare are part of the current bylaw, but I was talking about, remember how there was the 5-year grace period, but
Oh, yeah, if
But-
somebody complains, you get 30 days.
is the consensus to take that out too?
Yeah.
In other words, what would happen with existing lighting, you wouldn't be subject, like, although the existing bylaw, see, this is where the existing bylaw wasn't all clear, because I really followed the existing bylaw on light trespassing glare, and it wasn't clear what would happen to existing lighting if it came within that.
Maybe 90
definition. So
days, more fair.
90, okay, just give more time. Give more time, okay.
Would it be helpful, Denise, in this fix it, that we say that a year hence or 2 years hence, the enforcement and the penalty sections will be reviewed? And that way we can get a period of time in which moral suasion can take effect as everybody in the town, all the other parties that need to come to bear on this can figure out the correct way to do this?
What does everybody think about that?
I don't think we should extend anything. I think we should just leave it the way it is.
Yeah, I'd like to see how it goes for any length of time, not dictate that we need to come back in 12 or 24 months. We can bring it, somebody can bring it back whenever, at any.
Yeah, people can
town
always
meeting,
bring it back.
Yeah.
Right, or always add in enforcement. There's
Right.
no, I guess that's the stick part of the carrot and the stick.
Yeah.
So
We want to
Gail can
demo
try to
it.
do that. She can
Yeah.
develop phase two. in
for
A
special town
year
meeting,
or another.
Yeah, for October.
make special town meeting even more exciting, so. All right, thank you,
Gail,
Gail.
you have that Nantucket thing with the stars on it that you're selling or something like that? For $5, little magnetic thing you put on your car?
Okay,
That's
Peter.
on the to-do list. We do have a bumper sticker with that decal, but not just the decal itself.
Gail, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well,
And we look
thank
forward to
you,
getting
and I
this-
will be back to you on the 21st with a new motion to adopt.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Gail.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
that
you.
suggestion, Stephen and
Did
Chris.
so much work on this.
Okay, Jason, you're up. 5 years, 3 years to 5 years on the, so we're now on Article 80. Moving the select board from 3 years to 5 years? No, we're not done.
Thought it was time for dinner.
Yeah.
Pushing out there, Joe. Second.
Yes. Now, last time we discussed this, we didn't have one of our esteemed colleagues with us. So thank you, Jason, for being here. And there was an appetite last time, just to remind everyone, to
Yeah.
basically pass over this entirely and let the voters decide. So I did look up pass over as one of our options,
Pass
and it is an option, but it's frowned upon under town meeting time. Frowned upon. They're like, yeah, that's kind of a sissy.
Repeat.
Yeah, exactly. So, so the closest we have is quote unquote to pass over would be take no action as a motion. But before we get to motions, Jason, do you want to just explain to us the thinking behind this and the support levels for this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I'm gonna enlighten anyone that the things you don't already know. It's the advantage, there's disadvantages, and advantages. The advantage is not having potentially two brand new people coming in at the same time. Because I think the select board members feel that when you come in, it's a year to year and a half to really get your feet wet. And so having it spaced out, similar to the planning board, one person elected, one seat potentially turning over each election year, that's the idea. I think the downside is, will it scare people away from, from applying, from throwing their hat in the ring? Maybe, we don't know. This was kind of thought about before, or kind of at the same time that the changing the form of government kind of came on. So we kind of felt if the change of government is going to happen, it's going to be 3, 4, 5 years, 10, maybe, if it happens. And this would be one piece that could make it just a little more smooth.
Okay, Chris?
At the risk of never getting appointed to FinCom again, since the select board was unanimous in this, I guess that'll just be a positive side. I think, given how prescriptive, I think there's an option here, given how prescriptive we were about pushing aggressively for town council form of government to be looked at. And we satisfied Mr. Barnes that we weren't just saying, yeah, throw it to government study, but we asked them to come back with a plan. I think this is confusing to the voters to do it this time, and I think it's a bad idea right now
Okay,
in the
thank you,
context of what the work we're doing.
thank you.
I think in its own way, it endorses the current government.
Yeah.
Even though I understand completely, Jason, and I would, aside from all the other things that are going on, I would think it would be a good idea. But I think as far as the community is concerned, they'll look at it as an endorsement of current.
No, I don't think so. I think it's an indictment of the current form. It's saying this isn't working. There's at least at one point every 3 years, you're having 2 new people come in. And that's disruptive to getting things done. And I think the select board realizes that. And this is a fix.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying, I don't think the voting community is gonna look at it that way. That's my point.
We're asking them to comprehend much more difficult issues.
See, I would phrase it a little different. I agree with you, but I think it's a patch.
Yeah, no,
And
I
that-
still think town council is probably a better idea, but in the meantime, and Jason's right, things move slowly. We're not likely to get a new form of government in 2 years. I think that's far too fast to expect that change to happen.
I actually agree with you. Shockingly. I will say.
Wow, hell, outside must be cold.
Yeah.
Because hell just goes over in here.
When you sit next to each other, kind of the vibe.
Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, when I think about like the availability of qualified candidates and making a 5-year commitment, I think you limit who they are. I said this last time,
Mhm.
right? Because I think that we, as a extremely diverse community, want representatives of all, of all people on the select board. And I think a 5-year commitment limits that. I mean, even for me, if I thought about doing this, 5 years seems too much, right? And I don't, if we look at who we attract to run for select board, I think we have to consider that.
Now I'm questioning my position.
60% of the board right now has been there for more than one term. So that's 6 years and not 5.
But that's
Yeah.
their choice. right? Like if it was.
It
too-
is their choice, and it would be the choice of anybody signing up for 5 years.
I get that, but.
What I like about the 5-year in particular is that I like the rotating one off a year. I like that. I also like that somebody would probably do 5 years and step away. Because they think, well, 3 years isn't enough. It's like, you know, the Three Bears thing.
Hmm.
It's 3 years isn't enough, but 6 years and da.
10
And,
years.
and then you're
It's a long
running,
time.
and then you're running, you know, you're running again, having to run again, the expense and the hassle of running again. To put in a longer commitment than 3 years. So I can see the attractiveness of the 5 years. And I also think that I'm not sure, whilst everyone Peter knows is all for town government or town council.
No, everyone I talk to.
Oh, that's
selective.
different. I'm not sure it's going to pass because I think the people who like town meeting.
Hmm.
So
Like
I'm
the
not
people who go like
convinced.
it, yeah.
Yes.
I'm not convinced that town council will pass and the select board deliberately said, let's not get started working on this. Which that was brought up a couple of months ago, until we see what the will of the voters is about town council, because they thought about starting already to look at it.
Yeah.
So therefore, to then have so to make this at the same time as the other one, it might be confusing for some, but I understand the logic of it, I guess. Jill or Jeremy, did you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm just, I support it. I think it's a good thing to focus on one person each year and the board is a little less disrupted. I think it's a good thing.
I don't buy it. I think 3 years is fine.
Okay,
I think 5 years, which effectively we're saying you do one term and that's it. You potentially lose a lot of institutional knowledge. Whereas if somebody is good, you know, and they do 2 terms, they get 6 years and maybe they do more.
Jason, are you in your 3rd term?
In my second,
is it a
End of
second?
the second.
End of a
so I
second.
did come in with Rita, we were both brand new, and at the time, like it was a lot, but looking back. You know, when I look at, you know, what I knew in my 2nd and 3rd year versus the 1st. And, you know, Rita and I worked our butts off that 1st year, but it was, you know. It was that current board always educating us, and we're always kind of playing catch up because it's so complex.
So, do we have an appetite for a motion? Oh, I guess I first have to close the public hearing, though Jason is our public. Motion to close the public discussion or public hearing portion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Stephen?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Joanna? Joe?
All right.
Peter?
Aye.
Jill?
Hi,
Jeremy?
Aye.
Denise, I, okay. Do we have an appetite for a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adopt.
second,
Okay, further discussion on the motion? Okay, roll call vote. Stephen?
Aye.
Chris?
No.
Oh, I need to keep score. Haven't had to keep score yet. We've all been ayes up until tonight. Baby, well done. Nay. Okay, 1 aye, 1 nay. Joanna,
Nay.
Joe,
No.
okay? Peter,
No.
okay? Jill,
aye,
Jeremy,
No.
okay, that's it. I'm aye too. So so now we need another motion.
Make a motion to take no action.
Okay, oh, wait a minute, let me put motion to adopt. No, we do a little red circle around that.
You're the guy that doesn't like to take no action.
I want them to all be taken no action.
Yeah, I'm the one that likes.
We'll
taking no
eliminate
action.
ourselves.
Okay,
No,
there's a,
This is really taking no action. It's not really a negative reaction. It's a taking no
hey, yeah.
action. We always have.
But you're
Yeah,
telling
it's not
town
better than
meeting,
everyone, that's why.
our recommendation to town meeting is you take no action. It's not us taking no action.
No, we're not advancing it. We're not making a motion.
We're letting
You wanna make
people
one, you make it.
decide for themselves without our influence. Unless they watch this meeting.
so we have a motion, take no action on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, further discussion on the motion? Go right to vote. Stephen,
No.
okay? Chris?
Aye.
Joanna, aye. Joe,
Aye.
I can predict this, by the way. Peter,
Aye.
Jill,
no,
Jeremy,
Aye.
Denise, no. Okay, what a surprise. All right, the motion is take no action, 5-3. First time, folks, in the season.
There we haven't been unanimous.
Yeah, we've been unanimous on every other vote so far.
It's a good thing one person didn't sway. We would be missing our 9th member.
I'd be going home and grabbing Peter McCall. No, I'd have Libby do a coin toss because she loves doing it. All right, thank you, Jason. All righty, and motion take no action. Okay, no action. Okay, date of next meeting is Tuesday, February 21st, and it's fully remote. So try not to miss the trailer.
There was no room for us in the trailer.
I know, can you believe it? We just bumped into the trailer. Wait, we're not done. We're not done, folks. Committee reports, any committee reports?
No, we meet, we have a meeting. I'm sorry.
We've been waiting.
I forgot about that. Yeah, so we had a meeting of the short-term rental committee, another 3-hour meeting. And all we talked about was the same thing to talk about all the time. We're going nowhere. We're in a circle. And it's a problem, when you've got 9 people and I would say at this point, it's probably a 7-2 breakdown on opinions. And it just, we tend to go in circles and, well, Joe, it's interesting because Joe was
I
watching.
was thinking that I sat in on this meeting, there were two policy levers that the moderator talked about, described that were discussed. One was whether or not commercial or corporate owned rentals were a sort of a group that could be regulated or banned in some way or reduced in managed in some way. And the other one was whether you could create a regulation that would forbid the renting of a property, how do I say that, for less than one time a week, which strike me as it was a real narrow definition. It was, in other words, you can't have short-term rentals of 2 days, then followed by 2 days, followed by 2 days, followed by 1 day,
Oh.
filling up 7 days. You can only
In
rent the
season,
property
in
in season once per week, regardless of the length of the,
Okay,
Okay,
and they talked about that for a long time.
And that's a little bit.
Other communities do that.
A little bit stressed or strange because one of the people on the committee has a rental house. And she only rents for short term, 2 and 3 day. And they're always in the week, middle of the week, because her son runs it for her. And he can only clean them and stuff on the weekends to get them ready for Monday. It's crazy. But she happens to represent a lot of people. And so it comes up and it's it's also a compromise. If we say, okay, you can only rent it once a week. Does that make people feel a little bit more comfortable and the house isn't going to turn 3 times, even though it never would turn 3 times in a week?
Yeah, it's 60 grand, stay 1 night, stay
Yeah,
5 nights,
yeah,
stay
who
however
cares?
many nights you want.
Yeah. On the commercial thing is, this has been a discussion forever, and it comes back to the coffee group always, and it comes back to the house in Monomoy. And I love it, you have one house that's crazy and everybody's focused on it. But, I just am concerned. I don't know whether the moderator is gonna ever get us to anywhere. Right? And it's, she tries. I really think she has the right direction. But it's a little scary. I mean, 3-hour meetings are very difficult to begin with, remote. It's just, you get antsy. And,
I think they are aware that, the special time meeting is November, and that it has to have.
we have dates,
The
yeah.
group still if you're gonna get a article composed, it has to be done by sometime in June. And,
no,
Yeah,
July
I think-
16th.
yeah, so I think they know where the deadlines are. But yeah, no, it's a very disparate and talkative group. People talk for a long time.
A question, is there any clarity yet on what the real motives are? And you can define sort of the bid and the ask, what's really going on? Because it seems to me it's just a huge mess. And
No, if you ask what is the problem, you're not gonna get an answer.
You get 9 answers.
Yeah. Yeah, or you get an answer that there is no problem,
Mhm.
Sorry.
And when we had the public meeting and we went and asked all those questions, the predominant result was, well, what is the reason for this discussion?
Mhm.
And I think partially because Nantucket has been this way forever. And people are just very, very used to it. And for most people, they're not bothered by it. But, you know, I'm not saying everybody. I mean, there's certainly a lot of people that are bothered by it. But, you know, yeah, and obviously, I must say that we had the public part, we had 130 people, I think, that responded in this public meeting, which was really well done. We did it, it was all virtual, but it was in groups and it was really well done. I would say it was 100 realtors on the 140
Yeah.
people.
Everybody in my group was a realtor.
Yeah.
No, and I moderated I participated in that call. I moderated 2 of the groups as Peter did, and I think I had 12 or 13, you know, 6 in one and 7 or 8 on the other. And I can't say that they were all real estate agents, but they were all absolutely pro rental properties, and all, you know, the anecdotes were always, oh, you know, across the street, and if the party gets too noisy, I go over and they turn the music down, and I have no trouble whatsoever with rentals. And I was sort of surprised. I expected somebody to say, you know, this is a real problem, and you know, it's too much noise and too much partying and whatever, but.
And we need to have, you know, I think it's 80% agreement on whatever we come up with, which is difficult. And quite frankly, what I fear,
The math on that is difficult.
well, I think it's 8 out of 10. For some reason, I think there's only 9. Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember if there's 9 people from the making, so it's 7 out of 9.
7 out of 9.
Yeah, the thing that I fear, because I've seen this before in groups like this, is people feel they have to come up with something because they're in this group, and we end up coming up with things that are not important.
Well, the logic behind the 80% was that you wouldn't end up 5-4 and basically something that half the people aren't going to want to support. And then you've done all this work and nobody had any motivation to get the compromise. So the idea of putting pretty high barriers or high percentages of like, oh, you know what, 7 of us can support this. That was the logic of
Yeah,
it.
right.
So, because otherwise it's going to go to town meeting and it'll be split along the same lines. It was always split along, so.
Well, and then town meeting is another issue because, you know, the people that go to town meeting are not the summer people. And if the summer people were voting, it would be a different result, I think. You know, and I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see I don't know what we're gonna come up with. So I don't know whether there's gonna be anything to really vote on.
But
We'll
it
see.
sounds like you're not confident that you're gonna come up with anything that's truly valuable or meaningful.
As something substantive? No. I'm not sure.
My suspicion is they'll come up with a few things that people can agree on and try to declare victory and, you know, see if that kind of
Right.
tamps down the furor over this, but I don't know. I mean, and I will say, this is my opinion and reaction is, you know, I just think the Act Now sort of cadre of people who are anti-development and feel that the island needs to slow down on developing and have more open space, and they're pretty dedicated to their view, so.
Any other committee? Thank you, Peter, on behalf of all of us. And Joe, thank you very much. Thank you for carrying the FinCom flag on this one. I still will remind you that you volunteered just in case.
No, you know,
Because nobody would assign this to anybody.
I did volunteer and I'm glad I'm doing it after the meetings.
Yes, exactly. Okay, any other business? Yeah, go ahead.
So this week, Christy Kickham from Capcom came and made a presentation at Coastal Resiliency. And basically, they're setting aside just about $1 million a year for coastal resiliency projects in capital. And then this year, there's also $1 million in a different part of the budget for coastal resiliency. So the concern from Coastal Resiliency Committee is that that's not going to be enough of a chest of money to do any of the things we necessarily are going to need to do in the big picture.
But my understanding was that those monies were for studies to understand what has to be spent and what has to be done, more so than fixes. So the $1 million wasn't for fix.
Possibly, but we.
No, I'm just asking.
I don't.
That's my
Okay,
question.
I don't know I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay,
And I think that sometimes I just feel like we're floating out there. Having conversations about some of these things that need to happen, but there's not an action plan on how to actually move forward. Right, like there's not a definitive, okay, we need to do these three things in order to make the bigger plan.
But
Right.
if Denise is right, I think my understanding was similar to hers. If they have $2 million a year at the moment, if I got your numbers right, that buys a lot of consultants, do a lot of studies.
Well, the sediment transport study is supposed to start, and we still have to come to some sort of discussion agreement on what's happening at Baxter Road. Those are the two things that are really at the top of the list right now. And then additionally, there's some conversation about the group breaking into smaller groups and trying to break down what are some of the supporting steps that need to happen, because there's likely going to need to be bylaw change, zoning change and things like that. And we haven't identified what any of those changes might potentially be.
Vince Murphy reported last night at the select board, an update saying the plans in progress were, he, if I remember correctly, because it's, as we know, like FinCom select board, it's also riveting TV. That they are actually ahead of where they thought they would be now in terms of thinking about stuff. So but anyway,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyway,
And then coastal or contract review committee, I think the meeting's gonna now be next week about the money from the cannabis
yeah,
fund. And then I know Libby told Dorothy that she had to have everything submitted to her by March 2nd.
March 3rd,
March 3rd, okay, so.
told Jericho, yes.
Okay, and so I think at some point after that, she'll come to this meeting.
Okay, good,
That's the plan.
good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I heard you say and Stephen say that the March 7th meeting, I won't be here either. So you might want to make sure that you have a quorum.
Yes, so who's March 7th?
I'll be here by Zoom.
Okay,
I don't know. March 7th.
okay,
I'm
let's
here.
see. March 7th, I'm here.
March
Well, I'm here
7th,
for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
me
have
too.
7th and the 9th.
1, 2, 3.
I'll be here the 9th.
Jeremy 4.
Jeremy 4. Jill,
Jill.
are you here on the 7th?
Yes.
Okay, we're 5. And then I'm gonna resurrect Peter McEachern for that then, just to make sure. Bless him.
We'll have a picture of him.
I'm gonna say, Peter, you've got to come on the 7th or we
Yeah,
won't have a
like
quorum.
the people don't know.
So,
I'm
okay.
not gonna say what I was thinking.
No, 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 no,
Um,
that much, no.
Just a quickie on solid waste. We had a meeting this past week. It sounds like that there is progress being made on getting an RFP written to have various vendors propose to operate the landfill for us or whatever the arrangement is. There are still all sorts of technical decisions that have to be made about waste streams and which things we separate into what and again, I'm not quite sure. I understand or need to share all that detail. We are meeting, I think there's a meeting the next week or the week, no, the week after is vacation week. So it must be next week that we're meeting with a representative of Martha's Vineyards solid waste that has some ways that they deal with the organic component of solid. waste.
Okay,
Did you see the letters to the editor today? There's a letter from somebody in Falmouth about.
Yes.
We should hire this. I didn't quite understand what he was trying to say.
he wants our garbage.
Well, that was the Falmouth representative of the, on the steamship, whatever it is, managing group or whatever they're called.
Board
And
of
he was
Supervisors.
arguing that Nantucket should barge a lot of its waste to New Bedford.
On the
And,
steamship.
and the other people were concerned that it would
Going the other way
cost,
empty.
Yes, I have. heard that.
it would cost the steamship $187,000 a year of revenue if these trucks that now carry our trash to wherever they go were converted to a barge. It's actually a great idea because we only have about 3 years left of landfill space, and then the landfill is going to be filled and capped, and we're going to be shipping everything to the mainland.
Does the steamship do that? They
Oh,
have
yeah, no,
barges,
steamship-
don't they do that?
No, the steamship doesn't handle barges, but we have trucks that go, trucks full of
Yeah,
trash.
I always
all
thought
the time.
Barnstable was trying to tamp down the number of trucks that we were sending to Barnstable. I was surprised by that because it seemed
Well, it
counterintuitive.
was Falmouth, and I think.
No, but
that's why-
Falmouth was writing in favor.
No, Falmouth was writing in favor.
And the Barnstable guy was
of a
ready-
trash barge.
Right.
Oh, were there two
And the
today?
Barnstable guy was saying, no, because we'll lose revenue on the steamship, which to me means more trucks going through Barnstable.
Correct. But the Falmouth guy likes it because Falmouth was trying to reduce the amount of trucks. that
Barnstable
go through Falmouth.
steamship guy likes trucks, Barnstable, other people don't want.
Well, the sewer department is considering figuring out a way, and Mark Willett and Jeff, to figure out how to, the existing barges that are coming here, you're right, going back empty, but we have a stormwater problem. And so trying to figure out how can they get those barges to take stormwater off, right? And how.
What is stormwater?
So if you go to like a grate anywhere and pump
Lift
it
it up?
out,
Yeah,
right, to clean it out, that water can't go anywhere.
with leaves and all
Can't
the
go,
crap.
it can't go back.
Because there's
in.
other bad stuff in it,
Oh,
right? And so you have to now, you can't put it anywhere, it can't be remediated. So it has to be transported off island.
It's worse than sewage. It can't be cleaned.
It had, guess what it has in it?
PFAS,
Correct.
look at that.
And that now there is a giant pile of, what do you call it, plant material, compost, could be compost. There's a giant compost pile at the landfill that is all compost that was run through the composter when sewage from the sewage plant was also dumped into the composter, and the sewage from the sewage plant has PFAS in it. So now this whole giant pile of compost output can't be moved or put anywhere because it's PFAS contaminated. And the Mass DEP has no regulations on PFAS, so they don't know what to do. Everyone's sort of
Right.
this.
Because the other thing, that
No, it's a
the
different.
carpet cleaner people, like the people who clean your carpets, whatever that water is that's coming out of your carpets, it's filled with PFAS. And now, right now, it can only be disposed at down at the sewer treatment plant,
carpets. That's,
because carpets have PFAS.
Well,
Yeah, but the car wash is all PFAS too, by the way. I mean, it's not, you can't just pick on them. It's like a lot of companies.
what is what's it, is it in detergent? Is that what it is?
Everything.
It's also in
Yeah,
Scotch
well,
Guard.
it's in Scotch Guard.
Yeah.
It's actually in the furniture.
It's in your raincoat and it's in your bloodstream, by the way, 99% of human bloodstream.
If you tested your blood, you'd all have PFAS,
Yeah.
we've all been exposed to PFAS, like
Our
everyone.
whole life,
It's nuts.
Teflon.
Life-
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Stephen.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Joanna. Aye. Joe.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Jill.
Hi.
Jeremy.
Hi.
Unanimous.
Denise. Aye. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
We'll see you next week.
See you.